After an exciting week 2 of college football, week 3 has just as many exciting matchups. And given that week 2 had some kind of sleeper matchups that ended up being better, that could be the case. And we have a number of big games to discuss. We're going to dive right into it. Colorado and Houston. This is a Friday night matchup, and the Colorado Buffaloes are a team that is trying to figure out its quarterback situation. That is going to be something to keep an eye on. And this is a team that honestly needs to play a little bit better than they have. They obviously beat Delaware last week, but this is a team that can be better than what they're showing, and both offensively and defensively. And they travel to Houston, who's a 5.5 point favorite right now, to face a Cougars team that's playing with a ton of confidence. Connor Wegman looks a lot better than he has in the past. This is a big game for this program to show that, hey, this is going to be our turnaround year. Willie Fritz knows what he's doing. If you're a Houston fan, you have to feel good about the current trajectory of this team. Dean Connors is an electric weapon in this offense, and I think that he is going to be a big featured part of this team. Now, running the football against Colorado at times has been difficult for teams. And so this is something that Houston will have to do well. That interior defensive line for Colorado, when they are playing well and they're healthy, that's a really tough group to run on. And having Wegman's legs be a part of that as well could be a big difference in this one. That one's going to be really fun to watch if you are a Houston fan, if you're a Big 12 fan, if you're a Colorado fan. It's just going to be a really underrated matchup, a really fun matchup to watch. Kansas State at Arizona. Kansas State at one point was considered a contender in the Big 12, and that still technically might be the case, but they're 1-2, and now they're a 1.5 point underdog. And why is that surprising? Well, one, because of what I just said, but also Arizona is a team that a lot of people kind of counted out this year. They expected them to be at the bottom of the conference, and it's still too early to tell if that's going to be true or not. But the fact that they're favored says a lot about where both programs are at. I don't think anybody really expected either team to be where they're at. If you're Kansas State, I don't know what Dylan Edwards' status is going forward, but they need him back in a big way. They need someone who can be electric at the running back position. Jace Brown has been doing what he can, but this offense clearly needs a little bit of a boost. They need to jump somewhere, and Dylan Edwards could be that guy if he's back healthy. I don't know what he's going to look like if he's able to go, but they definitely need him back. Avery Johnson has been relatively inconsistent. We've seen some good things, but also I think that he's struggling right now a little bit as well. If you're Arizona, they're better than expected. Noah Fafita, I think, has benefited from, when you look at, we came into this year, we talked about the fact that he was not looking great. And the fact that he had the numbers that he did had a lot to do with Tetero McMillan being on campus, being on the roster, and being on the field. Now that he's gone, in a way, you could say that almost is better for him. Noah Fafita is going to be really fun because he gets to open up the offense, open up his eyes to other options. He gets to look for other players, and he actually has to go through his progressions. And it's still early, but that might be better for him to not just have to always worry about, okay, well, the pressure's coming in. I didn't know I have 4. I can just throw it to him. Now you don't have that. It kind of forces you to be better. And so far, he's looked pretty solid doing that. Now it's going to be tough against this Kansas State defense, but overall, I think that you look at Noah Fafita and what he could be, this could be a better year for him. And now that they're 1.5 point favorites, you feel like maybe they actually have a chance to win against Kansas State. That's how quickly things can change in college football. Vanderbilt heads to South Carolina. South Carolina is a 5.5 point favorite right now, and this is definitely one to keep an eye on. This is I don't want to say it's a big game, but it kind of is a big game. Vanderbilt has looked fairly efficient so far. They've done a lot of good things so far through 2 games, and this is definitely a game that they could win. Now, winning on the road at South Carolina is going to be difficult. The talent that they'll have to face is going to be challenging. But if you are Vanderbilt, the biggest thing you have to do is contain Lenora Sellers. And when I say that, you obviously want to make sure that you take him down when he's running the football. You want to make sure that he's not making big plays with his legs, but also you want to challenge him as a passer. I think one thing that Virginia Tech did 2 weeks ago against South Carolina was forcing Lenore Sellers to beat them with his arm. They were making him go through his progressions. They were making him read the defense. And if you're Vanderbilt and Clark Lee, that's something that I expect them to do, to give different coverage looks, to disguise certain things and make it so that he can't just beat you with his natural talent. And to be honest, that's what Vanderbilt needs to do. This is a Vanderbilt team, talent wise, that is not on the same level as South Carolina. South Carolina recruits at a different level, and Vanderbilt doesn't have the natural talent. I'm not saying they're not as good, they just don't have the natural talent that South Carolina possesses. That being said, Vanderbilt can win this game regardless of the talent that they have, because they're able to play together. They're able to play smart, disguise those coverages, disguise those blitzes. Those are different things that this team can do. And if you are a Vanderbilt fan, you have to feel good about where this team can go, where this team can be, because of the culture that they've established, because of the ability to play together. That is something that's really exciting if you're a Vanderbilt fan. And they've done a good job of being efficient when they have the football. They've been really good at making the most of their opportunities. You know, their yards per play is 5.31, which is 102nd in the country. So it's not like they're creating these explosive plays. They've just been efficient. Their success rate on offense is 62%. That's third in the country right now. Now it's 2 games, but that's something to keep an eye on. Diego Pavia is a big reason why they've been efficient. He's a smart leader. They have multiple guys that have been part of the passing attack, part of the rushing attack. Pavia has been a big part of that. He's a great leader. Eli Stowers is going to be a big part of it as well. He creates a mismatch that South Carolina has to figure out. And again, being efficient with your opportunities. You may not get a ton of opportunities to score. You have to make the most of them. And also, this defense does not get enough credit. If you're a Vanderbilt Commodore fan, you're realizing that our defense could be solid, and our defense has the opportunity to do some exciting things. Containing Lenora Sellers is going to require a group effort. It's going to require you to play with a ton of integrity, a ton of, attention to detail, and not relying on your talent to beat South Carolina's talent. That's how you lose this game. If you play together, you're going to be fine. But if you rely on your talent to try to win one-on-one matchups, you're probably not going to have a good time. Now, if you're South Carolina, you have to find ways to open up games a little bit better and not rely on special teams. Now, Vicari Swain has been electric. 3 punt return touchdowns essentially have opened up the scoring for South Carolina in both games so far. And they needed it against Virginia Tech. That game was closer for a long period of time. And Vicari Swain's punt return TD opened up the scoring. He had 2 TDs last week against South Carolina State. And he has been really fun to watch. And he can also be part of the passing attack as well. Lenore Sellers' development is going to be a question that we have throughout the entire year. His ability to, again, read those defenses. Vanderbilt is going to challenge him to read a defense, to go through his progressions, to understand what coverage it is and where he can beat a defense. Right now, I think there are some inconsistencies with that, and that's what teams are going to do. They understand that they're not going to try to take him on head on. They're not going to try to slow him down with one person. They are going to use their collective defense to slow him down, whether that's confusing him or not understanding where pressure is going to come from. And this is a tougher than expected test. Vanderbilt is going to be a very tough team to beat, but if you're Lenore Sellers and you can figure out this puzzle, you feel really good about what you can do going forward. And once you get into a rhythm, and that's the biggest thing for Lenore Sellers, once he gets into a rhythm, he is going to be almost impossible to stop, because the confidence he'll have throwing the football is going to let him play loose and just get into that rhythm. And then after that, once you realize, okay, now we have to respect his arm, he's going to take off with his legs. He's going to punish you in ways that he did last year. And that's just game over for so many programs in college football when that happens. South Carolina is still a team that is in the hunt for a college football playoff spot, and this is a good test for them early on. It's going to be very tough. Vanderbilt is definitely capable of winning this game. And while I do think that ultimately South Carolina should come away with the win, Vanderbilt is going to make things difficult. And they've shown in the past that they can upset teams that expect to win. South Carolina should not take them lightly. This one is going to be really fun. Another game that has a really exciting capabilities is Arkansas and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 9.5-point favorite right now. And while Arkansas hasn't played anybody, they've looked really good so far in their first two games. Taylor Green completing almost 72% of his passes for 561 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's also run the ball 18 times for 192 yards and one more score. He is off to a great start. And this is a team that's looking to keep Sam Pittman's job. A win over Ole Miss, who hasn't looked great starting out the year, could be a great way to do that. And I really like what I see from Taylor Green. He's playing with a ton of confidence. He's making the right reads. And granted, the competition they played have kind of made it that way. However, he is someone that is really fun to watch. And when he's playing at his peak, this is a dangerous team. Playing against Ole Miss, though, will be challenging. That Ole Miss defense provides a ton of challenges for him, provides a ton of different looks that you have to worry about. So Taylor Green definitely has to be sharp in this one. The one thing I'll say is that Austin Simmons so far for Ole Miss has struggled early in games. And yes, I know he is young. I know that it's going to take some time. However, this is a guy that should be playing better than he actually is. You played Georgia State, a team that he struggled against early on. Granted, it was his first start. Then you struggle against Kentucky. Now, whether Kentucky is actually better or not remains to be a question, but those slow starts can't continue. I understand that he's young. I understand that it's his first couple of starts, but you also can have expectations of him. It's okay to expect him to start faster, to make smarter decisions. 4 interceptions through 2 games is not great. And if you keep that pace up, you're not going to win a ton of games. And a team like Arkansas, whose defense appears to be playing with a ton of energy, a ton of excitement, and a quarterback that is looking to make a statement, Ole Miss has to find a way to slow that team down. And yes, they're 9.5-point favorites, but we've seen, just as Florida, how it felt to be a 17.5-point favorite and lose at home. Not saying that's going to happen, but there are things that Ole Miss has to do better if they're going to beat a team like Arkansas. This is not Georgia State. This is not Kentucky. This is a team that has a lot of ability to pull off an upset here, so you have to be careful. Oregon goes to Northwestern as a 27.5-point favorite. There's not really a ton to discuss here. I doubt that Northwestern is going to take shots at Oregon like Oklahoma State did. If they do, Oregon's probably going to put up 80 points on them. That's really just kind of how things have gone. If you're Oregon, this is a unique test. Going to a place like Northwestern, where the atmosphere is probably going to be dead, given that Northwestern's not off to the best start, and going to a place where the stadium is a makeshift stadium, and it's also just naturally tough to play at Northwestern. That is something that could provide them with the ability to focus and really lock in. Dan Lanning has stated that there are things that Oregon can do. There are things that the Ducks haven't done well, which is weird to think because this is a team that has destroyed Montana State and Oklahoma State. So what is there really that they can do? That is a big question. But if you're a team like Oregon, you have a higher standard to achieve. And Lanning stated that. They have a higher standard that they want to meet. So just because they put up 69 points and 59 points doesn't mean that there aren't things to fix. So the fact that they can get better is almost just as terrifying. Clemson at Georgia Tech. This game is very interesting. Clemson is 1-1. They needed a comeback win over Troy last week. They were down 16-3 at halftime. Unreal. They go to Georgia Tech, who's 2-0. Clemson currently is a 3.5-point favorite, which kind of speaks to where the Tigers are at right now and how much they need to get better. It's not looking good right now. And Georgia Tech had a big win over Colorado in week 1, but there are things that they need to fix as well. How does Clemson bounce back? That is the big question that I have for the Tigers, because right now it's not looking good. It's not how you wanted this season to start. And I think that there are definitely a lot of vulnerabilities that we've seen in this team. Now, losing to LSU at home wasn't anything to be ashamed of. You obviously wanted to get better, but then you do what you did last week and you struggle against Troy. You're down 16-3 at halftime. You needed a comeback in the second half to win 27-16. Now, when they needed to, they locked in and they figured it out. That's not a team you should struggle in and have to lock in and figure it out. That's the concerning part. Finding ways to win is going to be difficult if that's how you're competing, if that's how you're performing against inferior competition. Now you face a Georgia Tech team that has plenty of ability to pull off an upset. Now, Haynes King did not play last week. You looked at his injury from week 1. You felt like maybe he needed a little bit of a break, and you weren't concerned about them losing last week. He is back. How do they take him away? What are the different looks that they can give to take him away? How does the defensive line play a role there? How do they be disruptive enough to take him away? Because he had a big game against Colorado, and you had the ability to make big plays because of him. 156 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Buffs. He is going to be a big reason why they have success. Finding ways to take him away is what Clemson needs to do, because if they take him away, or at least force him to be more of a pocket passer, that's probably the best way they're going to find success. If you're able to slow him down and make him do the one thing that he's not as good at, that's going to help you tremendously. And right now, this Clemson team needs to find something. They need something that's going to work. And the offense needs help. The defense hasn't been as good as we wanted them to be, or at least we anticipated. So that is also a concern. Now, the big thing is offensively, you gotta find something that you can consider a rushing attack. That is a big problem right now. And I think that's kind of hurting this offense. Teams don't really respect what Clemson's doing as a rushing attack. You have to find ways to move the ball on the ground, because otherwise it's going to be a long year. Cade Klubnik clearly is struggling. He needs help, and the rushing attack is the best way to do that. And right now, this is a team that their EPA per play is negative. And if you're the Clemson Tigers, that's an unacceptable place to be in. Now, there's a lot of season left, but right now, that's not great. Same thing with, EPA per pass is negative 0.1. Every time that they're dropping back to pass, they're losing points. And that's already with a rushing attack that we talked about that's not looking good. So you don't really have answers, and you're not exactly doing yourself any favors. On third down, they have a 40% conversion rate. That's 100th in the country. That's not going to do anything for you. And especially in games like this, where you're going to need to convert on third downs, that is going to play a big role in that. And part of it is because they're not getting a lot of success on early downs. Right now, they're negative in EPA per play on early downs. So you're not going in the right direction. You're not getting enough on those first and second down plays, where you're kind of putting yourself behind the chains in a way. You're giving yourself a tough look, and that's not getting the job done. The defense isn't doing much better. The defense isn't giving their opponents better plays on those early downs, and that's making getting stops on third downs tougher as well. Granted, again, it is 2 games in, so we're not going to overreact to what's going on. However, that is a concern. Now, on the Georgia Tech side of things, obviously you got to keep Haynes King healthy. You have to find ways to get him involved. You also have to find ways to get other people involved. Get them the ball so that they can take some of those hits and they can get things going. His health is going to be a real important part of this. If he's back fully healthy and last week he just needed a break, that's fine, but that's something to keep an eye on. Can they actually catch Clemson at a good time? Is this the right time for Georgia Tech to pull off that upset? Right now, it appears that Clemson's as vulnerable as maybe they've ever been, and that's a great opportunity for Georgia Tech to take things to another level. Right now, they're looking really good in terms of success rate offensively. They're converting, 50.4% success rate. That's 22nd in the country. They're clearly getting the job done offensively. They're finding ways to be successful. Granted, you played Colorado. That was a big one, but last week, again, it's small sample size. Things are going to sort itself out. Lots of fluctuation. Getting pressure on Cade Klubnik is going to be a big part of that. And I would say that Clemson's offensive line hasn't looked the greatest. So that's something you could potentially take advantage of. You could potentially get after and see how this team responds. That's going to be something to pay attention to. And if you're Georgia Tech, you have to take advantage of that as much as possible. Central Michigan and Michigan. Michigan is currently a 27.5-point favorite. And while this game is not really one that's going to be close, I am very curious how the Wolverines bounce back. He had a tough loss at Oklahoma. Bryce Underwood didn't have the best statistical game, but I think that he looked just fine. The moment was not too big for him. The spotlight was not too bright. And in fact, he looked really poised. A lot of times he was getting a ton of pressure. He wasn't making a ton of completions, but he was making the right decision with what he was presented. Sometimes he missed on some open throws, but it's because he didn't have time for, like a wheel route or something to develop because he was getting pressure. He looked like he's just fine. He needs someone to help him out. Justin Haynes has clearly been a great weapon for this offense. He's been a big part of that. And Bryce Underwood obviously appreciates that. But right now he needs a pass catcher to kind of step up and deliver. Speaking of Oklahoma, they head to Temple in one of the more random week 3 matchups. Oklahoma going to Temple is not something we anticipated. John Mateer shined in the spotlight, I should say, last week against Michigan, and he's off to a good start. This shouldn't affect that kind of a start, though I will say Casey Keeler has this Temple team off to a great start at 2-0. Now they're probably going to get their first loss when they play Oklahoma, but this is a team that's playing with a ton of confidence. Evan Simon right now, 77.1% completion percentage, 422 yards, 9 touchdowns. Jay Ducker followed Keeler from Sam Houston to Temple. He's having a solid year. Oklahoma's a 24.5-point favorite. I don't see a reason why that changes at all. Wisconsin heads to Alabama in what should be a really ugly game. I don't have a ton of confidence in Wisconsin. Alabama got back on track last week, but who's not going to get back on track with the opponent that they played? You're going to have a ton of success, and it'll be interesting to see if Wisconsin can actually put up a fight. We'll see if Danny O'Neal is going to be the starting quarterback there. I don't know the status of Billy Edwards when he's going to be back, but right now the quarterback position for Wisconsin is kind of up in the air, and Alabama is not going to apologize. They are going to take it to them. But again, this has been so far a weird couple of weeks. I'm not saying Wisconsin is going to pull off the upset, but we also didn't expect Alabama to lose to Florida State. I don't think that Wisconsin's in a good spot, though. I think that Alabama is going to find a way to win. Another intriguing matchup that is probably going to go Auburn's way. They're a 24.5-point favorite over South Alabama, but the Jaguars going to Auburn to play the Tigers. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm very curious to see how Bishop Davenport performs. I think that South Alabama offense is super underrated. They have a ton of talent. They have a ton of exciting players. It's just going to be hard to go against that Auburn offense and that Auburn defense to put up points and stay in this game. I think Auburn takes care of business, and we see potentially another good performance from Jackson Arnold. Moving into the afternoon slate, we start with a big one, Georgia and Tennessee. This is a game that I think a lot of people thought was going to be solid, but nobody anticipated that it was going to be where both programs are at. Everybody, I think, kind of assumed that Georgia would be 2-0. Tennessee was kind of up in the air. Joey Aguilar was the big question mark for Tennessee, and we weren't exactly sure what we were going to get from him, but so far it has looked a lot better than we anticipated, and that's really exciting if you are a Tennessee fan. And if you're Georgia, you're going to have to figure out ways to kind of put a stop to that. Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite heading into this game. Gunnar Stockton is going to be a guy that I keep an eye on. This is a guy that coming into this year, we talked about how he was the X factor for the offense. The rushing attack appeared to be just fine. The passing attack does have plenty of options. You brought in Zachariah Branch. You brought in Noah Thomas. You have good tight ends. This is a deep group of pass catchers that should make his life a lot easier. The question is going to be, can he distribute the football efficiently and safely? Can he limit the mistakes? Because this is a Tennessee defense that is still just as good as it was last year. In certain ways, they are obviously still trying to figure out certain positions, but this is still a tough defense to face. And if you're Georgia, you have to find ways to get your quarterback in rhythm. And that's up to Mike Bobo to figure it out. And Gunnar Stockton has to have a good game in this one, because this is a Tennessee team that comes into this game with a ton of confidence. I think a big way to do that is just getting him some of those easy reads, some of those quicker throws, getting Zachariah Branch the ball. However you're going to do that, whether it's a bubble route, a quick screen, a slant, whatever you need to do to get him the football, just give him the ball and let him work. Yes, this is a Tennessee defense that should be able to handle that, but that's going to help you long term. Gunnar Stockton's role in this offense is probably going to dictate how successful this team is going to be this year, and this is their first big test to prove that. Gunnar Stockton is going to be really fun to watch. We talked about Joey Aguilar and his importance to Tennessee, but if you're Georgia, you have to find ways to confuse him. You have to put him in stressful positions where he's not making smart decisions, where he's giving you opportunities to pick off passes. That's going to be a fun thing to pay attention to if you're Georgia. How do you switch up the looks? What is Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart, what do they have in store for that? I like a lot of the different things that we've seen so far, some of the trends for defenses, the ability to simulate pressure on one side only for it to drop back in coverage. And those are different things that you can do to confuse a quarterback. And there's so many different varieties that you can do. You can give that, the double mug A gap blitz. You can have guys go up to the line of scrimmage and drop back. You have linemen drop back. Joey Aguilar is someone that you're going to have to disguise looks and confuse him right away. And this is an offense that's going to present some challenges for Georgia that spread out. And when we say spread out, we mean like absolutely spread out to the sidelines, using every inch of field that you have. Josh Heupel's system is going to put stress on this defense. So any way that you can gain an advantage over this team is going to be difficult, but it's also going to help you tremendously. Right now, the Georgia Bulldogs have the talent to be able to do that. It starts up front, and that's going to be a battle. The battle between this defensive line against Tennessee's offensive line, it will be an intriguing matchup to watch. Joey Aguilar also, you have to find ways to make him make NFL type throws. I think that Joey Aguilar is a good fit for Tennessee's offense because of some of the throws that they'll ask him to make. And some of those throws are truly going to be, hey, we got this guy one-on-one. We want you to just chuck it deep and get enough air under it so that your guy can run under it. That's something that he can do. Now, one thing I will say is that some of these tight window throws that Georgia's probably going to force him to make, he's done really well at making some of those throws. He's also struggled with those. So if you're Georgia, you want to make those throws as difficult as possible and make it so that he either has to thread a needle or really drop it over the top of the defense. Right now, I think that's a bigger concern if you're Joey Aguilar, and this Tennessee team is how consistent he can be with making those types of throws. Those are going to lead to incompletions. We saw that in week 1 against Syracuse. It's also going to lead to potential turnovers. That's going to benefit Georgia tremendously, and it's going to put them in a great position to win this game. I think that getting pressure, limiting those explosive plays with this offense, Georgia has so many of the simple things that they can do and very obvious things, but if they're able to do that, they're in a good position to win this game. For Tennessee, there's really not much to lose here. Georgia is going to be favored. A lot of people are going to pick the Georgia Bulldogs, and people still have concerns about Joey Aguilar. Now, like I said, I think that Joey Aguilar is a good fit for this offense. I think that he does a lot of exciting things. What he did at App State fits really well with what Josh Heupel is going to ask his quarterback to do. And that could lead to some exciting things. We've seen this Tennessee offense present challenges to good defenses. We've seen them put stress on defenses that are really good. And right now, if you're Tennessee, you need to find ways to keep that defensive line of Georgia away from your quarterback. Keep him upright, get him in rhythm. Joey Aguilar is going to lead you to success if you find ways to do that. Now, the other thing is, on defense, you have to force Gunnar Stockton to beat you. This is a rushing attack that's just fine. We already talked about the weapons they have on offense. Gunnar Stockton has to be your focus. How do you put him in stressful positions where he has to play well? He has to be a factor because we know he can run, but can he be efficient as a passer? Creating pressure, again, disguising those coverages, really force Gunnar Stockton to read a defense, force him to make smart decisions. That's going to be something that both teams benefit from. And Tennessee has that opportunity as well. You also have to find balance. Getting Joey Aguilar in rhythm is good. You also have a rushing attack that appears to be just as good as it was last year. And you have a three-headed monster in that backfield. I think that balance here is going to throw off Georgia. That's going to give them an opportunity to make some big plays, and it could potentially surprise the Bulldogs. I do think Georgia wins this game. I think that this is a team that is in a good position. I think that they have more talent right now, but don't sleep on Tennessee. I think this one's going to be close, but both teams are still really fun to watch. They're off to hot starts, they're off to exciting starts, and I think that reality kind of hits Tennessee, even though they're at home. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, week 2 was kind of crazy, but this is a game that could potentially be really fun when it's all said and done. SMU goes to Missouri State in one of the more random matchups again. 27.5-point favorites, a tough loss to Baylor last week. SMU is looking to get back on track. It starts with Kevin Jennings. It starts with that offense. The defense is obviously looking to have a strong start, but this Missouri State team has an offense that could potentially give that defense fits. That's going to be something to pay attention to and something that could have a big impact on the game. I think SMU is going to be just fine. I think when the season began, Oregon State fans thought that maybe they could give Texas Tech a run for their money, and that still may be true if an upset truly happens, but right now Oregon State does not look good at 0-2. Texas Tech has been kind of just breezing through its competition and sits 2-0. Baron Morton's health is going to be a big one to pay attention to, a big storyline for Texas Tech. He's so far looked good. Already had an injury scare though, so that's something to keep an eye on. But Texas Tech should have no problem. They're 23.5-point favorites in this one. Pitt and West Virginia. This is not as exciting of a matchup as it maybe was coming into the year, but it's still the backyard brawl. Pitt's a 6.5-point favorite right now, and West Virginia is coming off a loss to Ohio. Pitt has looked fairly solid so far. Eli Holstein, 70.6% completion percentage, 519 yards with 8 touchdowns. I'd really like to see Desmond Reed get more involved in the offense. I'm excited to see how they do that. And West Virginia has to figure something out. The loss to Ohio did not look good. They've lost a number of big names to injury for the rest of the season. So that is something that's going to be very frustrating for West Virginia fans. Rich Rodriguez knows that he has work to do, but that is something that's been so frustrating so far. Yet another random matchup. Iowa State goes to Arkansas State, goes to Jonesboro to face the Red Wolves. They're 21-point favorites right now. And again, just really random matchups where we have Power 4 teams going to Group of 5 home stadiums, and part of that is scheduling, but it's just really fun to see these matchups. It's also so random. So far, Iowa State has looked pretty good. They sit at 3-0, and they beat Iowa last week. They're hoping to avoid a hangover game. Now, do I think Arkansas State can win this game? No, not by any means, but this is an Arkansas State team that I think is better than people realize. They're 1-1, but this is a team that could be a sleeper in the Sun Belt. We talked about that coming into the year. Iowa State just has to find ways to avoid that hangover game, avoid that letdown game, and find ways to just come away with a win there. Louisiana goes to Missouri. Missouri's a 27.5-point favorite, coming off that big win against Kansas. An electric experience. This offense appears to be firing on all cylinders right now. Louisiana kind of down right now. They are not looking as good as we anticipated, and you're probably not going to get that back on track against Missouri. I think the Tigers should be able to handle this one pretty easily, and that offense should be a big reason why. One of the bigger matchups that I think a lot of people are talking about more now than they were at the beginning of the year is South Florida when they face Miami. Miami is a 16.5-point favorite right now, and this is a South Florida team that is playing with arguably just as much confidence as anybody in the country. Byron Brown is going to be an electric player, and I think that people still are sleeping on him. I mean, the AP poll has this team ranked 18th. Like, what is that? What are we doing here? That makes no sense. Byron Brown is also slept on. I don't think a lot of people knew who he was coming into the year because he didn't have the best year in 2024 due to injury. 2 years ago, if you were paying attention to USF, which let's be honest, most people were not paying attention to this Group of 5 team. They just weren't. Byron Brown is still kind of slept on, and it's a big reason why he's been able to have so much success is because I think teams are kind of underestimating what this team can do. Byron Brown is a perfect fit for this offense. I think that he fits what they want to do really well. And Alex Golesh is super excited to have him back. I think that if he had a good year in 2024, there's a good chance he might not be back with the Bulls this year. The fact that his injury happened maybe is a blessing in disguise. Byron Brown, though, has looked solid in his first 2 games against Boise State, against Florida. And this is a team that's looking to pull off yet another shocker. If they're able to do that, this one would be the most surprising performance that they've had so far. Brown plays a big role in that. Can they create explosive plays? Keyshawn Singleton has been explosive for them. Chaz Nimrod has been explosive for them. This is a team that has relied on some explosive plays to open things up for them or to put them back in the game in terms of getting ahead or taking advantage of a turnover. Those are going to be things to keep an eye on. Now, the one thing that they give you is you're going to see Corey Heatherman is going to have a unique experience. Defending this team is so difficult because of the wide splits that they use, because of the unique offense that they run. And Miami is going to have a tougher time defending that because of the uniqueness of this offense. And explosive plays are going to happen because of that. We've seen that against Florida. We've seen that against Boise State. If Miami is not careful, they're in for a long day. And it's not going to be a blowout by USF by any means. But if this game is close like they were able to do against Florida, that's going to be a long day for this team. You're going to feel stress. The pressure is going to get to Miami because this is a South Florida team that is ready to pull off yet another upset. They are not going to sit around and wait for you to figure things out. They're going to take it to you, and they're not going to worry about what you're doing. The biggest thing, though, that I think presents a challenge to South Florida's offense is Miami's defensive line. When you watched Miami against Notre Dame, the defensive line was a big reason why when the game was on the line, Miami came away with the win. Ruben Bain is a monster. He is going to be so tough to block. Akeem Mesidor looked really good. This is a defensive line that if you're not careful is going to ruin your day. And right now, Byron Brown needs time to throw, especially against this Miami team. He is going to need time to throw. He's going to need time to make plays because if he's going to look downfield, it's not going to be a quick slant. He's going to want to take a deep shot, and he needs time to do that. He needs time to evaluate the defense and see what they're doing in order to distribute the football efficiently and safely. Can they stop this offense is another question. I think right now, this defense has shown that they can be opportunistic, that they can hang around. The Boise State game, Boise State made some mistakes, and this team took advantage of it. They need to do that again. And I don't necessarily know if this is the best defense, but they have good experience. And they're playing with a ton of confidence right now. The question is, can you stop this offense? Stopping Malachi Toney is a much different challenge than anything you've faced so far. Stopping CJ Daniels, stopping Carson Beck, stopping this rushing attack. That is something to keep an eye on too. They have a three-headed monster in this backfield for Miami. So if you're South Florida, you have to find ways to slow this team down. You have to find ways to gain an advantage and be able to hang around. And so far they've been able to do that. It's going to be fun to see if they can do that again. On the Miami side, you have to get to Byron Brown. You have to find ways to slow him down, whether it's in the rushing attack, whether it's in the passing attack. You have to find ways to be disruptive because the Bulls are so good at giving him time to make plays, getting him involved as a runner. He is a really efficient player when it comes to this offense. He's also a big body. He's 225 pounds. So tackling him is not going to be fun, especially if he gets to the second and third levels. If you're Miami, you have to find ways to take him away and force him to be relatively ineffective. You also have to deal with the spacing. This offense is so unique. You just don't get to line up like you traditionally do. They're going to send 4 guys as close to the sideline as possible, and you have to find ways to slow that down. How do you create pressure when some of your defenders are literally on the sideline next to the chains? You're not going to be able to do that as well. So Corey Heatherman has to find ways to switch things up and present different looks. That's going to be really fun to watch. That chess battle is going to be exciting. Taking care of the football, not making mental mistakes. It seems obvious, and like you could say that for every single game, but it's so true. Florida did not take care of those things. They did not make smart decisions. They did not take care of the mental side of it, and it cost them. Making dumb mistakes is the quickest way to ensure that this run by South Florida continues. And it's been so fun. It's been such a fun run for this team. And if you're Miami, you're looking to make a run as well. This is a team that was left out of the college football playoff last year. And while a win over the Bulls isn't exactly a resume builder, it's still a better win than some of the teams you're going to face. So you're not going to complain if you beat a team like this. South Florida is looking to get to the playoff. And at this point, as long as they win the American, they're going to do that. They're going to be able to achieve their goals. Even if Miami beats them by 100, which it's not going to happen, but even if Miami beats them by 100 and they win the American, they're in the playoff. And right now, they're the front runner, and it feels like there's a pretty big gap between them and the next team because of the resume. This is another opportunity. There's nothing to lose here. They just have to go out and play. And if you're Miami, you have to take care of business. You want to put this win away as quickly as possible because you know that this team's coming in with a ton of confidence. They have some things that will provide challenges. And if you're a Miami fan, you expect things to be handled quickly and efficiently. Liberty goes to Bowling Green. You just lost to Jacksonville State. They're a 6.5-point favorite right now. Bowling Green, I think, is really fun under Eddie George. I'm very curious to see if they're able to give Liberty a little bit of trouble. Ethan Vasco has been solid for the Flames so far. Drew Pine for Bowling Green. Not the most electric passer, but completing nearly 76% of his passes, 383 yards, and 1 touchdown. A name to keep an eye on, the group of 5, Dorian Pringle, the linebacker for Bowling Green, has been really good so far. 20 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He has been really fun to watch if you are a Bowling Green fan. And this has been, I mean, overall, it's been a bit of a transition, and that's been really interesting to watch for Eddie George. The excitement with him coming to campus, there's not a ton to dissect yet, but this is a big opportunity for them to potentially pull off an upset there. Ohio goes to Ohio State. Ohio State is a 32.5-point favorite. Ohio is not going to pull off the upset here. I also said that about a couple of other games, but Ohio just doesn't have it. Parker Navarro, though, is going to be really fun. As long as he takes care of the football, this one shouldn't be too terrible, but Ohio State got back on track offensively last week and should be able to have another strong performance there. A very intriguing matchup that suddenly becomes important to Brent Pry is Old Dominion coming to Virginia Tech. Now, Virginia Tech is a 7.5-point favorite. They also will not be with Jason Henderson. He's retiring due to injuries. That is a linebacker that they are going to miss. However, this is a defense that has plenty of talent without him. I think Old Dominion has sneaky good talent in this one, and they've also found ways to upset Virginia Tech in the past. Colton Joseph has to take care of the football. He has to be efficient with his passing, and he has to be electric with his legs. This is an offense that can give Virginia Tech fits. Running up against that defensive line, though, for Virginia Tech could be challenging. Now, Vanderbilt found ways to be explosive. If Old Dominion wants to be in this game for longer than people anticipate, then running the football is going to be a big part of that. For Virginia Tech, suddenly this becomes a must-win. Suddenly you have to win this game because if you don't, Brent Pry probably being shown the door. And it seems like that's where things are headed anyways, but you have to find ways to take care of business. You're 7.5-point favorites, and it's not going to look good if Old Dominion is able to hang around in this one. But that is another intriguing matchup to watch. That's another exciting matchup to watch. And I think that Old Dominion, once again, we talked about this coming into the year, this is a team that could be really good in the Sun Belt, a sleeper team, if you will, that not a lot of people are paying attention to. Speaking of those aforementioned Gators, Florida has a chance to potentially bounce back. I don't know if that's going to happen, but they head to LSU where they're 9.5-point underdogs. LSU had a tougher than expected win over Louisiana Tech, and Florida obviously loses at home to the South Florida Bulls. That is not a great thing if you're Billy Napier. It feels like he's probably on his way out. It's just a matter of how many more losses do they have to stack up before that happens. DJ Lagway so far has looked all right at times, but overall this offense has kind of stalled. You only put up 16 points against a group of 5 team. Something has to change here. You have to be able to find a way to bounce back. Pounding the rock is going to be a big part of that. Jaden By's been really good so far. 27 carries for 197 yards, 7.3 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. I think that running the football is a great way to slow down LSU's offense. You keep the ball out of their hands. You keep it away from Garrett Nussmeier, and that is something that could have a tremendous impact on this game. I think that if you're Florida, you have to find ways to do that, because you're not going to win if you're trying to go score for score against LSU. You're just not going to. That's not a successful formula that you can follow. You have to keep their players in front of you. They have so many explosive weapons, and it's going to be tough. This is an offense that's full of pass catchers that can hurt you. Aaron Anderson is off to a good start. The tight ends for LSU have been a factor. We saw that against Clemson. And Nick Anderson, who is one of the best wide receivers on this roster, has been largely absent in terms of production. Same thing with Chris Hilton. So just because you stop some of the good guys that are having good seasons right now, like Aaron Anderson, doesn't mean that you're guaranteed success, because you have so many different players to worry about. And after last week, it's easy to see why people maybe are a little bit skeptical of what this team can do. This defense is going to have its work cut out for them, and it's going to be for a different reason. You have to be disciplined. And honestly, there's a lot of pressure on this team. Your coach is kind of on a hot seat. He's not in the best position when it comes to keeping his job. And not that these kids are directly responsible for being invested in that, but they definitely know that they have to play better. And it's a season that can quickly get away from you if you're losing to a group of 5 team and then you followed up with a disappointing loss to LSU. That is something that you want to keep an eye on. And not that this team's going to quit, but this game could have big implications for how this team performs long term and how long Billy Napier is around. Now, if you're LSU, you're 2-0. You've got that win over Clemson on the road. That was a solid win for this team. But I think overall, there are some questions. This is not the most efficient team. This is not the most explosive team yet. We've seen that this is a group that has struggled, and we've also seen some good things. So I think I just described like every college football team, but LSU is no different. They have been good at times. They've also struggled at times. I mean, last week, only winning 23-7 over Louisiana Tech. Now, maybe Louisiana Tech is better than expected, but that's not a promising result. You're trying to prove that the Clemson win was a good win, and then you struggle against Louisiana Tech. It also doesn't help that Clemson needed a comeback win over Troy. So those are 2 things that aren't exactly adding up. But you can't really do anything about that. You're 2-0. That's what you have to focus on. I think keeping DJ Lagway in check for the most part is going to be a big part of that. Play action is a big way that Lagway has success, and being disciplined on that. LSU's defense has done a really good job of elevating its game. And so far, this is a group that's playing with a ton of confidence. If you're able to swarm him, get some pressure on him, be disruptive, this is going to go in LSU's favor relatively quickly. That's something to keep an eye on. And honestly, this quarterback battle between Garrett Nussmeier and DJ Lagway could be really fun. I think that both of them have a ton of talent, and both of them could go back and forth. And it would be really fun if it was a shootout. If it was a barn burner, just going back and forth, trading blow for blow, that would be really fun to watch. But I think that if you're LSU, getting off to a fast start kind of ensures that that won't happen. again, your defense, if you're LSU, is playing a lot better than what we anticipated coming into the year. They've exceeded expectations. This is another opportunity to do that. The other thing is, don't beat yourselves. Not that LSU has done that, but Florida has done that. They literally did it last week. Beating yourself is a quick way to lose this game. And weird things happen in this game sometimes. So being disciplined with that, not taking stupid penalties, not making those mental mistakes, keeping control of the football is going to help you tremendously in this one. And it's going to be fun to see how this team can stay disciplined and how they can create those explosive plays. Overall, you should feel pretty good about what LSU brings to the table. I don't have a reason to believe that Florida can win this one. If college football is truly chaos, that'll be really fun, but I think that LSU comes away with this one. I don't have a ton of concerns about their ability to win this football game unless Florida looks drastically different than it did last week. Texas A&M at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 7-point favorite right now, and I think the biggest question right now is Marcel Reed's health. Now, it sounds like Mike Elko has said he's going to play. There aren't really any concerns about that, but this is a team that needs him to be in the game. He brings an element that no other quarterback in this roster has, and they need him to be back. You look at what they did last year. Could they have used Marcel Reed more? I think you can make an argument for that, but it's too late. You can't do anything about that. You can only do what you can do in this one. Now, going on the road is going to be a little bit more difficult, but this is a team that's 2-0, and Marcel Reed has played a big part in that. And his ability to be efficient as a passer is going to come into play here in this game. Now, maybe they're able to run the football efficiently, because right now I think that Notre Dame's defensive line is better than people expected, but I also think it still has some deficiencies. Texas A&M's offensive line is very good. So I think that you're going to see a team that relies on the run regardless of if Marcel Reed is the quarterback or not. As far as we're concerned, he's playing. So we'll see what happens there, but I think that their ability to run the football is going to be a big part of their success. And that much is going to be true throughout the year, but especially against Notre Dame. Winning the physical battle that you're going to have, especially for your offense, will set the tone, will dictate the pace, and will tell you if you're going to have success. It's also going to open up the play action for Marcel Reed to find some easier throws to hit. I think getting him in rhythm early is something that Colin Klein is going to have to do. Finding plays that work for you, that get your quarterback comfortable, is a big way to help you win football games on the road. Defensively, I think that you have to be physical up front. That much is very obvious. And I think that the defensive line, like we talked about heading into the season, is a lot better than I think people realize. And being physical up front is a great way to slow down Notre Dame. It's also a way to pressure CJ Carr. I think at times Miami got to him in week 1 and it really rattled him. And there were other times where he stayed calm and collected. Finding ways to rattle him will be a big part of it. This is a young guy that is still learning the game of college football and understanding how things all work. He is going to need some time to get comfortable once again. This is another big time matchup for him, and he's going to have a different type of test. Facing Mike Elko will provide you with different challenges. Being physical up front is going to start that, and you're going to find that life is a lot easier when you're limiting that rushing attack and forcing CJ Carr to maybe beat you with his arm. Getting explosive plays for Texas A&M is going to be a big part of it as well. I think that your ability to find explosive plays through the rushing attack will be part of that. But if you can find those in the passing attack too, that's also great. We've seen some of these plays. Casey Concepcion has had some explosive plays. Meyer Craver has had some explosive plays. Finding those explosives will be a big way to guarantee your success in this one. I think there's plenty of reason why you should be excited about your opportunity, but it's a Notre Dame defense that has a ton of talent. It's going to be tough. Throwing the football against this Notre Dame team is not easy. Now, there are opportunities maybe in the slot for you to find ways to be successful, but you have to find them. And if you're Texas A&M, you feel very confident about what you could potentially do, even with some of the concerns you have. On the Notre Dame side of things, CJ Carr, I think, is going to be really fun to watch this year. I think he showed tremendous poise at times, and he bounced back from some difficult plays. I think in the Miami game, we saw him struggle at times, and then something clicked in his brain where he realized, you know what? I'm going to at least stay calm. I'm going to make sure that I'm making the right decisions and making some big plays. I don't necessarily have to play hero ball. I just have to take what the defense is giving me. And while Texas A&M isn't going to give you a ton, you have to find those plays where the defense kind of has a lapse. The defense struggles a little bit, and Notre Dame has the ability to scheme things up. Mike Denbrock has done a good job in the one game they've done so far this year, and I think you're going to open up the playbook a little bit more. Now, you do, in my opinion, you got to get Jeremiah Love the ball way more. There was a stretch against Miami where he just didn't touch the ball. And I don't necessarily know it because we've seen this a couple of times so far. You know, we saw this when Iowa State was playing Kansas State. Carson Hansen didn't touch the ball for a long chunk of time. And I don't know if it's teams that have good depth at running back, they're using the backup to kind of wear down those teams. That's something to keep an eye on. Jeremiah Love, maybe that's what they were trying to do. I don't necessarily know. I'm not in the meetings. I don't know what Mike Denbrock is thinking, but I do know that Jeremiah Love needs to touch the ball more and needs to run the ball more than 10 times. Yes, you have a good running back room, but Jeremiah Love is obviously the most talented player in your running back room. Getting him the football more is only going to make sense. It's only going to help CJ Carr, and it's only going to help this offense. Finding ways to slow down Marcel Reed as a runner and kind of just force him to beat you as a passer is really going to have a big impact on the game. Marcel Reed is not a guy that can shred you as a pocket passer. And I'm very curious to see how Chris Ash and Marcus Freeman decide to handle that. How do they address that? What kind of challenges do they present to him? And how do they put him in conflict of making plays, making smart decisions? That is something to keep an eye on. When it comes to who's going to win this game, last year, I think a lot of people expected one result, you got another. This year, I think a lot of people are anticipating Notre Dame. Texas A&M is still a very good team. Now, Marcel Reed's status is probably going to dictate a lot. Right now, I'd say I would lean Notre Dame. They're at home. I think that they had a tough game against Miami, and it's another tough one here, but they're prepared for that. They're in a comfortable environment, and it's going to be fun regardless. Marcel Reed's return and his health is going to have a big impact on this game. Either way, it's going to be really fun. ECU at Coastal Carolina. ECU is a 7.5-point favorite, and so far they've looked pretty good. They obviously wish that they could get back the NC State game, but so far this is a team that's looked fairly competitive and fairly explosive. Caden Hauser, 680 yards and 3 touchdowns. The passing attack is in good hands, and they could have another big week here. For Coastal Carolina, MJ Morris, not off to a great start. 265 yards passing, 0 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. The defense has done its part for the most part. Obviously the Virginia game was just bad overall, but last week kind of leveled things out. But the passing attack for this offense is not looking good right off the bat. Utah heads to Wyoming. Again, another Power 4 team going to a Group of 5 program's home stadium. Utah is a 23.5-point favorite, and a large part of that has to do with Devin Dampier. Devin Dampier is one of the best quarterbacks in college football right now, and he has Utah on a mission. Honestly, nobody really wants to play Utah right now. They're playing with a ton of confidence. They took it to UCLA. They beat Cal Poly 63-9 or whatever it ended up being. This is a team that's playing with a lot of confidence and is looking to bounce back in a major way in the Big 12. For Wyoming, they're off to a good start as well. This is a team that's kind of surprising at 2-0. Caden Anderson, though, we talked about his ability to step up, 427 yards and 3 touchdowns. This offense I thought was going to be better. I thought this team was going to bounce back if that happens. So far, that is the case. Now, I think that Utah is going to win this game without much problem, but Wyoming does look better than I think a lot of people realize. Duke at Tulane. This one, I think a lot of people are going to sleep on because Duke just lost to Illinois. but this is going to be a fun game for a lot of reasons. Tulane is currently a 3-point favorite. And when you started the year, that probably wasn't the case. You had a ton of turnover on this Tulane roster. You had a lot of new faces coming in. And there were some concerns about this team's ability to compete at a high level. They kind of erased those concerns on the first play against Northwestern. They took it to the Wildcats. They survived against South Alabama. And maybe they were looking ahead to this game because Darian Mensah comes back to campus. The former Tulane quarterback decided that he wanted to go to Duke. They wanted to get more money in NIL, get a better opportunity with the Blue Devils. And while last week wasn't great, I think overall he's still going to be in a good position. His return to campus is going to be so much fun to watch. I think the atmosphere is going to be electric. The Boo Birds, if you will, are going to rain down on him, and that's going to be really fun to watch. It's going to be a great atmosphere for a super underrated college football game. Darian Mensah has been solid so far. 73.5% completion percentage, 723 yards with 5 touchdowns. Now, he has missed some throws that could potentially have changed last week's game. He had 2 corner routes that he missed for sure. That is something that has to get better. He has to refine, go back to the drawing board, go back and watch the film, and I think that he'll learn from it. Now, one guy that did step up for him was Andre Anthony. Last week, phenomenal. Had a number of big-time catches, and this is an offense that I think could find a lot of success through the air. Andre Anthony is a big reason why. Cooper Barkay so far has looked really good. This is a passing attack that still has a lot of exciting potential despite their struggles last week. The mental mistakes, though, for Duke, you have to fix those. Last week, they had 5 turnovers. Illinois took that and turned it into 21 points. Purely based off the points off turnover, Illinois would have won that game 21-19. But they win 45-19, and the mental mistakes were a big reason why. Fixing those errors, dealing with the pressure. There's going to be pressure on you to fix those. There's also going to be pressure on you to beat Tulane on the road. That's going to be difficult. That's going to be a challenge. Darian Mensah knows that, but he knows that he has the ability to make an impact, and he has the ability to change some of the mistakes that he made, the turnovers that he made, the missed throws. Those are things that he can change that help dictate how successful this team can actually be against Tulane, because this is a Tulane defense that's going to provide a ton of challenges. That's going to provide a lot of difficulties for your offense. And this is a team, and John Summerall's team plays with a ton of energy. And it's going to be a defense that's going to give you a ton of frustration. That is something you have to deal with. On top of the fact that this is going to be a loud atmosphere, there's going to be a hostile environment that's not happy that you chose to go from Tulane to Duke. That's something to keep an eye on. Now, the one thing I'll say for Tulane, embrace the environment. Deal with the fact that your former quarterback is coming back, but also regulate your emotions. You may have certain feelings towards Darian Mensah, but it's just another game. And I think John Summerall is going to talk about that. Focus on what we do. Focus on what Tulane can do to win this game. Focus on the process. Don't worry about the extra things that are coming in, the outside factors. Find ways to embrace that environment. We're also going to see both quarterbacks, Jake Retzlaff and Brendan Sullivan, are both going to play. That's going to be interesting to watch. What does the offense look like when Retzlaff's in? Is it going to be different when Sullivan goes in? That goes to show you that nothing is safe right now, and it's also going to be fun to see how that breeds competition. You're also going against a really good Duke defense, and that defensive line, if Tulane can't figure them out, they're in for a long day. That's a Duke defensive line that gave Illinois plenty of trouble, and Illinois' offensive line was very good. Tulane's offensive line is not Illinois' offensive line, so that's something that could provide some challenges. Limiting explosive plays. Like I said before, this Duke offense has explosive ability. They have exciting players that can make big plays. Keeping things in front of you is going to be a big way to keep you in this game, to keep the fans involved, and give you a chance to pull it out. And then pressuring Darian Mensah, finding ways to rattle him. The crowd's going to love that. The crowd is going to be over the moon for that. They're going to be so excited if you're able to do that, and that's going to help you kind of build into that confidence, get momentum on your side, and have a really exciting game for sure. I do think that Duke bounces back in this one. Tulane, if they're able to surprise us, that's great. But I think that Duke is a team that's going to slow down this offense. I don't know how many points Tulane will actually be able to score, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be electric, and it'll be interesting to see if Tulane can actually pull off the upset. They're playing with a ton of energy. They played their week one like they were a midseason team already, and if they're able to do that again, then an upset is definitely possible. Underrated game, Navy at Tulsa. Navy's a 14-point favorite. I thought that Tulsa could have been off to a 2-0 start, but they struggled against New Mexico State. But Dominic Richardson off to a great start. 40 carries for 235 yards and 1 touchdown. He is off to a big year. And I thought about that coming into the year. I thought that he could be a really fun player for this offense. Ray Coney is playing really well for the Tulsa defense as well. It's just very difficult to play a triple option attack like Navy. Blake Horvath so far has been kind of pedestrian when it comes to his numbers, but he's had his teammates step up in a big way, and he's operated this offense very efficiently. Landon Robinson is someone to keep an eye on against that Tulsa rushing attack as well. Air Force at Utah State. Air Force is a 4-point favorite. They appear to be back on track. You feel really good about what the Falcons are doing. You also are facing a Utah State team that looks to be better as well. Bryson Barnes is going to be someone to keep an eye on for the Aggies. Cade Harris looks really good for Air Force. It's a unique offense, so how Utah State handles that is going to be a big question. Another big one to keep an eye on, Texas State at Arizona State. Arizona State is a 14.5-point favorite coming off that upset loss to Mississippi State. That is not what they anticipated. They're obviously very disappointed in that performance, but they're looking to bounce back in a big way. Now, these two teams played last year, and it was a battle. It was a close game, and not a lot of people anticipated that. However, that was at Texas State. This one's at Arizona State. You're going to get the fan base back in it. Hopefully that gives your team a little bit of a boost, and you're going to find ways to be more successful. Last week was not good. The offense did not look cohesive. They did not gel very well. And if you're Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, you have to find ways to bounce back. I think that we talked about Kenny Dillingham and what he said coming into the year of somebody has to be average or somebody has to struggle, and why not us? And that's, I think, a very interesting thing to say about a team that's coming off of a college football playoff. Now, do I think that he was hoping that his team was relatively average? No, but that is a warning of a coach that sees things and maybe thought that this was coming. That being said, this is an opportunity to really lock in. Texas State comes into this game at 2-0, and they're playing with a ton of confidence. Arizona State has to find a way to move on from last week, find some balance, and flush that result and forget about it. That almost like it didn't happen. That's going to be a big way to find success, to find a way to win and get your team back in rhythm. And Sam Levitt also has to get back in rhythm. Last week was not a great performance from him. Now, part of that is that the passing attack is pretty much just Jordan Tyson or bust. They need somebody else to step up in a major way. Jordan Tyson so far has been solid, but they do not have the depth that worries a lot of teams. And if you're Texas State, you're just basically going to try to take away Jordan Tyson. You want to get your offense going. You want to get Brad Jackson going, Bo Sparks, but you also want to take away Jordan Tyson and see if anybody else on Arizona State can actually do anything. The rushing attack is just fine. You have a three-headed monster there. Sam Levitt can also run, but taking away Jordan Tyson in the passing attack could be a great way to keep this team in this game and for longer than people anticipate. Now, Arizona State is still a 14.5-point favorite, so that could be challenging, but I do think that this is a team that has the ability to make it interesting. And if we have another electric game like we saw last year, we're only going to be rewarded even more. And it's already going to be, I think, a really good week. Another underrated matchup at the end of week 3 is going to be Minnesota at Cal. Now, Minnesota is 2-0, as is Cal, and the Gophers are, I think, better than people anticipated. So far, Drake Lindsay has looked really good, and this is a Gophers team that put up a ton of points last week. Granted, it was against Northwestern State, but I think in the past, this is a Gophers team that would have struggled to put up points, and the hype surrounding Drake Lindsey is only growing. This is a good challenge for him, though. I think this is going to be an opportunity for him to show that, hey, I can play against solid competition and still have similar results. That's going to be fun to watch. So far, 429 yards for him, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. This is a defense, and the matchup of him against Justin Wilcox and that defensive scheme is going to show us a lot about, one, if Cal can win this game, but also the future of Gophers football, the future of Drake Lindsey, to see what we're going to expect from him going forward. Balanced offense is going to have to be the key. Again, this Cal defense will present a lot of challenges, keeping them on their toes with that balance, still running the football. We have a lot of excitement in this running back room, Darius Taylor, AJ Turner, but the passing attack also is going to have to do its part. And so far, Drake Lindsey appears comfortable in his role. He has to be sharp. He has to be able to decipher what's going on in front of him to read those coverages. Again, Justin Wilcox is going to prevent him from having a ton of successful plays, but how do you find some of those bigger plays, those explosive plays? That's going to be a big question for this Minnesota offense. And if you're Cal, you also have your young quarterback that you need to get involved. Jaron Kiawe Segapolutele is going to be really fun to watch. We've already seen some exciting plays from him. You also have to find ways to get him involved. This Minnesota defense is a lot better than I think people anticipate. They do have their flaws, but they're going to be a tough group. The defensive line is going to be tough to block. The secondary has plenty of talent. Finding ways to get him involved and get him in rhythm early is going to be a big part of that. I think you have to keep him comfortable. You also have to limit the turnovers. Limiting the turnovers has shown that you're going to be able to stay in this game and also keep things going. And I think in the past, Cal has struggled with that. And so far this year, they've done a really good job of taking care of the football. It's also going to prevent this Minnesota team from getting a ton of momentum. When they have turnovers, they play loose, they play fast. Last year we saw that. You look at the USC game, that was a defense that was playing fast. They were hitting hard and they were playing a ton of confidence because they had those turnovers. If you're able to take that away from this team, you feel really good about your opportunity there. Minnesota and Cal, super underrated matchup, very fun one to watch. The last one we'll talk about, Boston College at Stanford. Boston College is a 10.5-point favorite coming off that disappointing loss to Michigan State. Dylan Lonergan is so fun to watch. He's off to a great start. Same thing with Louis Bond. There should be no problems here taking care of business against Stanford. We'll see what the quarterback situation for Stanford is going to be. Ben Gulbranson is clearly not the option, but we haven't really seen them use anybody else, so I don't know if that's going to be something that they try to fix. Or maybe they just throw Andrew Luck out there and disguise him as somebody else. At this point, something's got to change if you're Stanford. Week 3 is going to be electric. There's so many exciting games, and it's going to be fun to see how things play out. We have a lot of big games, but we also have a lot of underrated games. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.